Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, coming to you 6 days a week as we interview whitetail experts and hear their traditions and personal stories of the hunt. Learn more about the latest gear, discover proven tips, and the latest strategies so you can make your next hunt a success. Now, here's your host, Bruce Hutchin.
Welcome to another edition of Whitetail Rendezvous. We're going to head north of the border to a good friend of mine, Dr. James Mather. Dr. Mather and I met up, got to be a couple of years ago, don't you think, James?
Yeah, I think it was a good 4 years ago, probably. Time flies.
Time flies, but Dr. Mather and I got together because I found his blog. Now, the hunt blog or the hunting blog, correct me, what's the title of your blog?
Thehuntblog.com.
So, folks, go to thehuntblog.com and check it out. There's some renovations there, but you're going to find some interesting stories, and Dr. James and his buddies share their experiences there. But even
you find us on Instagram at The Hunt Blog, as well as on YouTube under the same name as well for some of our other media.
Okay, so just Google The Hunt Blog, and you're going to find Dr. James and the rest of the people. But Dr. James had a couple kids. He's a private practice doctor, plus he's an ER doctor in a small community near Toronto. And he loves hunting whitetails. And that's why I reached out to him and said, hey, let's catch up and let's get your alumni of the show. So let's get you back and figure out what's going on. And the main question that I asked during the warm-up was the time element for you, and how do you get free time, being busy as you are, to hunt whitetails?
Yeah, and it made me think of it. We were chatting in the kind of preamble to the show here about costs of hunting and costs of out-of-state trips and going out of province and tags and trophy fees and all these things. And I mean, for me at this point in my life, the biggest cost is time. I mean, you can put money away here or there, but it's hard to put extra time away. So time management is probably the biggest thing for me at this point in my life. I have 3 young children, busy workload, family commitments, and these kinds of things.
You know, when you think about that, there's a lot of people that are going to hear the show. Thousands of people will hear the show. And everybody, the mantra today is, I'm too busy. But yet people go shed hunting and people go trout fishing and turkey hunting. They all fit it into their time. Now, how do you schedule your time for prime time whitetail hunting?
Yeah, so time management's really important. And for me, it's pre-planning and actually writing these things in. So, I mean, I have multiple calendars. I have a work calendar, I have a family calendar, and I have a hunting calendar. I mean, all of these things get molded together to set aside time. It's easy to just find excuses to not do things. But if you can schedule time in advance, and my wife's very understanding, and we work together on the calendars, managing 3 children and recording things down. So everything's planned out well in advance. My buddies know that my hunt weekends for this coming fall are already set up now and already booked in the calendar because I have to arrange time off work. I have to arrange childcare for the children. My in-laws and my parents are great for helping out with the kids as well, getting kids to hockey, baseball, soccer, all of these kinds of things. So planning and pre-planning and booking time off is a big thing.
Now, when you think of white-tailed deer, there's many, many different parts of the hunting season. We got the early season, and then the deer shift to acorns and mass. They shift their feeding, so there's another transition late September. Then we bump into October. And then they're doing some different things because they're setting it up for the rut, and you'll start seeing grapes open up and stuff like that. When do you prefer to take your time that you can invest? Because you're investing time hunting white-tailed deer. So we've always been told, invest wisely. How do you do that?
Yeah, so I think we mentioned previously, I exclusively bow hunt for whitetail. So our season in Ontario basically runs from October the 1st until December the 31st. And then interjected in there are 3 separate gun seasons. So there's a muzzleloader season first week in November, then a shotgun season middle of November, and then a late muzzleloader season, usually first week of December. So that kind of is my starting point. Bring out the calendar, mark off those 3 weeks as to where they are because they're kind of a no hunt zone. And then we try to plan around that. I laugh sometimes. People say, well, what's the best time of the year to go deer hunting? Well, whenever I have free time, that's the best time. So whenever there's time available. There's obviously better days than others, but really it's when things kind of work out. So the first prime time that we always try to set up is the very last weekend before our first gun season, which usually falls around Halloween, usually first week of November. It changes from year to year, but we always book off that weekend. Now we kind of dance around Halloween a little bit because being the guys, we all have young children. So we make sure we're available for the kids on Halloween Eve to go trick or treating. But otherwise, we try to schedule that weekend as our bow hunt setup.
Now, how many days do you take?
So generally speaking, we all get together on the Thursday night and then we hunt Friday, Saturday, Sunday is generally how we work it. If we can squeeze in a hunt on the Thursday night, we can get off work early, then we will. But that's generally the game plan. Because we're limited with time, we do kind of a version of party hunting. We all kind of work together, the gentleman's agreement that we share all the venison between the 5 of us or 7 of us, whoever can make it, even the guys who can't make it that particular weekend or day. So we work together. There's obviously some spots that are better than others, but we take turns rotating through who hunts what stands, try to formulate a game plan. And we have to adjust from year to year based on weather conditions, based on how high the river is, how easy it is to cross, based on food and agriculture that's in the local area, crop rotation. But that's generally a 3-day hunt that we hunt hard, all day sits for the most part, sometimes small pushes of a bush or something to that effect.
Now, do you have a journal? Do you journal?
So I make good use of a couple of different apps on my phone to log everything, to keep track of things. We do keep notes year in, year out. We also have hard copy printed maps that we print out every year, and I keep copies of those so that we have notes from year to year. A lot of it gets kind of stored in our heads and that kind of thing. Be careful, sometimes stories get exaggerated from year to year and start things much better than it actually is. We use a couple of online apps on my phone that we kind of keep track of, and it helps us track deer sightings, trails. It's interesting to see how things change from year to year.
One thing people have found through literally millions of trail camera photos that have been taken is that there's a trend to deer behavior throughout the whole season. And everybody knows that. But when it comes to rut, there's also a defined trend where bucks are spotted or not spotted. And the ghost buck, the bucks that's been on your camera consistently through the fall, all of a sudden they disappear. But they go someplace. They are someplace. And the people that are being very successful hunting ghost bucks or mature bucks have figured out that they're not that far away. They might be within 200, 400 yards of that trail camera, but you have to adjust because they've made a move based on the time of year. And we all know that you get chasing phase and seeking phase and lockdown phase and then the post rut and all those type of situations. But the key is to determine on a long-term basis where those bucks go when they disappear. Have you guys got enough data and do you analyze it on that basis?
So a couple of points there. So the first thing, we were talking about time and trying to find time for scouting and for planning and for hunting. I kind of mentioned about keeping track of things over time, over the years, and understanding our hunting spots and getting information, like you said, doesn't happen in one season. It happens over 5, 6, 7 years that we start to see some of these trends. Similar to what you're saying about the ghost buck, we kind of see somewhat the opposite. So where we hunt is almost exclusively public land. They tend to be smaller-ish tracts between 100 and 300 acres of public land. So my trail camera strategy during the summer is usually to put cameras on heavily used trails, mostly to kind of get an inventory of what deer are in the area. Most of these deer don't actually live on our property, so we don't actually see good feeding patterns, bed to feed patterns in the early season. They tend to kind of travel through once in a while in the summertime, but to us that means that they know the area and at some point they may be back. And in all likelihood during the rut, when you talk about the behavior changes and the bucks disappear, well, we hope that those bucks are disappearing back onto our property. Now, the reason I think that they don't live there in the summertime is probably just because of pressure, not hunting pressure, but people walking their dogs, people going on hikes, mountain biking, these kinds of things. So I think the deer, probably live and bed more on some of the adjoining properties. We do have a lot of doe family groups, which is also something we key in on. So we can keep track of what does are on the property. And at the end of the day, we know when the rut starts that those bucks might come back and search for that. And that's what we've seen on a year basis with our trail cameras. Once the rut hits later in October, move trail cameras to scrapes again to kind of get inventory. And that's the transition we see deer that we haven't seen at all year. All of a sudden start showing up on our properties. because they do hold a good number of doe groups that don't get pressured as much.
Now, public land is called Crown land in Canada. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I mean, in Northern Ontario, we call it all Crown land. In the areas where I hunt in Southern Ontario, most of it is actually land that's owned by the municipalities or conservation authorities. And so one area in particular is owned by a conservation authority, and you basically buy a pass to be able to go and hunt there. And that's how they fundraise for the conservation authorities, by taking money from hunters to do this. A couple of areas are public drains that the farmers use that are owned by the municipality, because they're not buildable or not farmable. So the municipality owns them, and they're kind enough to let hunters go in and make use of them during the hunting seasons.
Huh. Now, you mentioned in your bio, you have some sort of camp. Now, is your camp obviously close to this public land?
So we call it hunt camp. So my first weekend, as you talked about, is that first weekend of November, the last weekend before gun season starts. And our hunt camp is usually out of the basement of my house. My wife is kind enough to take the kids and move out to the in-laws and give us the house for the weekend. And then I make sure I hire a cleaning lady to come in afterwards and buy some flowers, that kind of thing. But we also usually try to do a second weekend of hunting, and that weekend's usually first weekend of December, and that's up Northern Ontario. So, about 5 hours north of Toronto, near a place called North Bay. And we have a more formal hunt camp there. That's one of our buddies' cottage that his parents are kind enough to let us use as kind of a base camp. That hunt is definitely different from down here. It's big woods, vast forest everywhere, no agriculture whatsoever. Deer feeding on cedars and cedar swamps. So it's a bit of a different hunt. And we've been doing that for 5 years now. And I think we've seen, same time frame, about a 3-day hunt. We've probably seen maybe 4 or 5 deer in the 5 years that we've been up there. It's just hard bow hunting up there. It's so thick and so vast. But we do that more for the camaraderie and to get together. It's a weekend that we all have booked off every year to get together and get caught up. We don't see each other as much with families and things. So it's a different kind of hunt, but enjoyable just the same.
Well, you do have wolves up there too.
Oh, yes, lots of wolves. In fact, I can tell you a story. This year we went up and winter came early and we got a good blast of snow. Went up November 30th, December 1st weekend, and we had about 3 feet of snow, and there would be absolutely no way to move through the forest without snowshoes. And I didn't know this when I first pulled in. And there's a meadow that oftentimes we'll set up in because we'll see deer come out there to feed. So I grabbed all my gear on the first night I went up there and decided I was going to walk out into this meadow. Well, I got about 200 yards into the meadow in waist-deep snowdrifts and was barely able to move, flopping around on this. And there wasn't a deer track in sight for a kilometer. There was no sign of deer there. And as I'm flopping around, I said, you know why there's no deer here? Is because any deer that came out here would be a sitting duck for a wolf, flopping around like this. So yes, there's lots of wolves up there. We've seen lots of wolves, and they're an eerie creature. I can also tell you this. So we'll go out hunting, we'll park the truck. And if we get a fresh snow, we'll park the truck, we'll go out hunting for our morning hunt, and we'll come back after our hunt. And you can see where the wolves have walked around the truck and just smelling where we are. So it's interesting. They know you're in the area, and the number of wolf tracks will increase over the weekend we've been there.
Interesting. Because I remember the first show, we did talk about habitat and the impact wolves have had, and they'll continue to have. Northern Wisconsin faces the same thing, Michigan, where they have wolves, and it makes it harder. But then when you go to your northern camp, it's about the hunting tradition and connecting with people. And I know this will be my 53rd year hunting basically the same farm in Wisconsin. Not basically, the same farm in Wisconsin for 53 years. And you think about that and how people grow and things change, and it's a great connect time. So talk about the hunting tradition and what it's meant to you over the years.
So I was lucky enough to grow up in a hunting family. My dad hunted, my uncles hunted, my granddad hunted. So to me, earliest memories were always, telling stories, sitting around in the hunt cabin, talking about past hunts, talking about this year's hunts, talking about plans for this year. So that's sort of what really got me into hunting. And then over the years, we've kind of developed my own group of guys that we get together. My dad still comes to our hunt camps every year, and a couple of his friends. And then just to sit around and get caught up, like I said, you live not a long ways apart. Most of us are 2 to 3 hours apart now for busy jobs and families. So it's nice to get together and get caught up. When you share a common interest like hunting that everyone's passionate about, the conversations are always great. Just share good food and some good drink and just enjoy ourselves.
Yeah, well said. And thousands of people can relate to that. And everybody has a little bit different tradition. Let's talk about adult onset hunters in Canada. Are you seeing an increase in that?
So that's a really interesting thing. And, probably one of the things that I pride myself on a lot is trying to get new people into hunting. I was lucky enough to grow up in a hunting family. The other three guys that we hunt with did not grow up in hunting families and really took up hunting in their late 20s. Basically, they'd heard stories from me. We'd been friends. We played hockey together all our lives. We went to high school together. They'd always known that I'd hunted and done these sort of things. And as they got older and got interested in hunting and started to ask more questions, they eventually got their hunting licenses. And now they're just as gung-ho, if not more so than myself. So, I think if you can take one person and bring them into hunting, then that's awesome, especially adult hunters. And I've had a couple of people that I work with that have, start to show some interest. And I always offer up the option to, hey, if you're interested, you want to learn more about it, get your hunting license. I will happily bring you out and show you my spots. If you don't know if you're going to be interested, come on out and sit in the turkey woods with me on opening day and listen to all the gobbles and tell me that doesn't get you excited or get you more in touch with nature. So I think being able to introduce other people into the sport is something that more people should pride themselves on when you talk about success, not how big a buck you shot or how many deer you've shot or how long is the beard on your turkey. How many people have you introduced into our sport and they're now getting enjoyment out of it?
And the other thing is organic meat. I know down here in the States, people are going organic crazy. And if it's not organic, then I'm not going to eat that meat. And hunters have been eating organic meat forever. Never made a big deal of it. We just killed something and processed it and ate it. Now it's a fad with some people. But at least some people are getting to the point, and I know one lady's been on my show, and Stephanie Vu, who was a vegan. And I found out about her through some other people, and I had her on the show, and it was interesting. She said finally came to grips with the fact that she wanted to know where her food came from. She wanted to know how it was taken care of, how it was processed, and all those type of things. And plus, this lady climbs mountains and skins mountains, an outdoors lady, and she never connected the hunting aspect to it. I think what you said is so well taken. You want to just invite people and what's your lifestyle and say, why don't you just come along? Forget about carrying a gun. And in the springtime, here the turkeys come off the roost and it's exciting. There's no question about it. Listeners, it's up to each one of us to introduce people, to take the time and not just say, well, you don't hunt, so you can't be my friend. Wrong answer. Why don't you come over for a barbecue? Why don't you come over for dinner? And then give a nice venison roast. If you get any backstrap, you won't have any backstrap left, but a roast and a good glass of wine and good fellowship and friendship. And then all of a sudden they go, what is that? Well, it's venison. Correctly is as good as anything else you're going to find there.
Absolutely. I was going to say to that organic meat aspect, there's no doubt that it's healthier. You don't need me to cite studies about calorie content and fat content of venison versus beef and all these things. Everyone knows that it's healthier for you. But to me, it's also about that, you said, knowing where your food comes from, but that understanding that an animal gave its life for you to have that meat, that experience, being in touch with nature and knowing that. I'm in the same kind of boat with how I'm introducing my children to hunting. My 6-year-old daughter is starting to get a better concept of life and death, and an animal has to die. So I've talked to her about that with regards to hunting and her understanding that when you eat chicken nuggets from McDonald's, a chicken had to die for that. And so in talking about deer hunting, I'm open with her and talking about death and that what happens to the animal. I've asked her if she wants to see the deer. She's interested when we bring them home. I've asked her if she wants to see the process of butchering the deer because we do all our own process. And she does. She wants to know and to eat it. I never forced any food on them. I've always offered it, but they need to know where it came from. They didn't just pop out of the sky. The same thing, she comes turkey hunting with me. So I always my first turkey hunt of the season is always with her. And doesn't tend to be the most successful in the world because 6-year-olds don't sit very still out in the turkey woods when they get distracted. But it's also my most enjoyable hunt of the year. And I've told her, if a turkey does come in, it's your decision whether we want to shoot it or not. Once you see it walking in, then we'll talk about it and decide, is this something that you want to be a part of or not? And so, not forcing them, the hunting on them, but I think they need to understand. So I talk to people who are non-hunters in that regard as well. Yes, it's great. The meat's fantastic. It's organic. It's healthy for you. You know where the food comes from. But it's also an experience and an understanding, a respect for nature that an animal gave up its life for this. And I think that that's important.
Yeah, well said. And thank you for doing that. And as a doctor, let's talk about the physical aspects of hunters tend to be healthy, tend to be active, tend to keep their body in shape and their mind sharp. It does take mental process to hunt all day sits. So how do you help your clients do that as a doctor?
Yeah, so my profession as a doctor, it's really fun. I meet a lot of people. I tend to meet a lot of patients who are hunters, and we can kind of talk shop a little bit after we talk about healthcare and things. There's certainly more of a trend now than I think there ever was. I don't know if it's social media related or what, to, these fitness freaks who are hunting and all these kinds of things. But I think that's great to promote fitness to an extent. But I think more than promoting fitness and I can climb 3 mountains and carry this ram out on my shoulders, just promote general health. And that can be as simple as going for a walk and doing some shed hunting, to eating healthier, to getting out in the outdoors, getting our kids out in the outdoors, getting them away from a computer screen or a phone and going for a walk, go to look for some wild turkeys. So I talk to people about general health stuff rather than fitness training. I want people to do things that are sustainable over a long period of time. People are like, well, what diet can I do to lose 10 pounds so that I can be ready to go on this backpacking sheep hunt? A crash diet for 3 months isn't going to be a sustainable life change. What you should look at is, what can I do every day that is an achievable goal to be healthier? If that's going for a walk, if that's doing yoga in the morning, if it's meditation before bed, lots of different types of health. But I think those things are more important than the other. I hope that kind of makes sense. I know I didn't exactly answer the question, but I think if everyone took a small piece and tried to make small steps at being healthier day to day, is going to be easier than trying to make drastic changes. There's lots of information about quick fixes and that kind of thing to try to make yourself healthier. But I think it's smaller steps that are sustainable over a long term.
And that's kind of like how to become a better hunter. Now, over the years, you've seen things change up for yourself. And let's share a couple of those things that you've changed to make yourself a better hunter.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, some of that is a facet of where your hunting opportunities are. So how your hunt has to change. When I was younger, we were lucky enough to have a gracious farmer that had given us a private farm to hunt that was 15 minutes from home. We could zip out after school. After my dad got off work, I'd be waiting for him to, ready to go, hop in the truck and zip out for a few hours. Was an unpressured place. There was great food. They could leave some beans on if you wanted to. So our hunting focused a lot on that feeding pattern in the evening, traveling to bed in the mornings, hunting funnels and that kind of thing. Since over the years, and I've now kind of changed locations, and now I hunt primarily public land, but kind of changes your hunting strategy a little bit. For one, you can't hunt the farmers' fields because they aren't public land. So by definition, you can't really hunt over a field edge. So you have to hunt travel areas. You have to find alternative food sources and browse. In the last 2 years, I know you've had some of these people like Dan and Fault on talking about hunting bedding and these kinds of things. So I've started to dabble in that a little bit, but I'm just barely touching the cusp of that concept of looking for deer bedding. And I was kind of doing it without knowing it before, trying to hunt heavy trails closer to thick cover where deer feel more comfortable. So we're trying to transition more to that. Again, back to bringing it full circle to discussing about time. I don't have tons of time to go and scout and find deer beds and that kind of thing. So it's an accumulation of knowledge over years that's kind of changed our hunting style. I think if you were to plot where our tree stands are on the maps of our properties that you'd hunt, you'd slowly see them moving closer to the thicker cover, closer to areas that we might have overlooked before. Some of our better spots are right beside the road. One of our best spots is a small tract of land that's not very wide, but it follows a river where the deer uses a travel between 2 large private farms that, I probably wouldn't even considered hunting because it's maybe only 200 yards across. So over time, you accumulate knowledge and it changes you both because of necessity and just learning more things.
Yeah, I like what you said, and I'm going to camp on this a little bit. Eddie owns a farm, and his son-in-law has had a stand there in a big pine less than 50 yards off the road. But he doesn't bow hunt, rifle hunt. So that's his stand. And this year, I got below his stand and was sitting there, and 5 bucks came over. There was one 10-pointer, and I didn't shoot him. And they were all chasing one doe. And it was just unbelievable experience. I had the 10-pointer and an 8-pointer 10 feet from me. and I'm backed into a howled out tree. So a tree dies and it just howls out. So I had put myself in there. I shoot compound. So it was on my shooting sticks and I'm going, oh my goodness. But I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything. I wasn't going to shoot them anyway. But folks, you need to figure out where the deer want a crossing road, but travel corridors are evident within 100, and I'm going to say in my case, 200 yards from a county road. And do cars go back there every minute? No, but they go by there all day, and farmers are on it, and trucks are on it, all that other good stuff. But I think a lot of people miss that opportunity, and that's my 2 cents. And start paying attention. You don't have to go a mile into the woods. Yeah, I know if you're elk hunting, it's a completely different story. But for whitetails, they get used to where people aren't and where hunters aren't. I find it just interesting, and I've only been hunting this farm for 50-some years. The tree stand's been there the whole time because we knew it was a crossing route. They go up the other side, and it was right on a ridge and so forth and so on. It wasn't on a saddle. Actually, the saddle was about a quarter mile to the east. But for whatever reason, they love this crossing. And so people don't minimize that and find places, the pinch points and the funnels that connect large bodies of land plus the water source, the meandering stream, because typically that's good cover. And it dips down. A deer doesn't need very much to become invisible. And to walk by you, you could be 50 yards from that little creek bottom and you'll never see that buck. You might see top of its horn if he's a really big buck. Your thoughts on what I just said?
I couldn't agree more. I used to sometimes get into the habit of the enemy of good is great. And you'd be walking by this trail and it's only 50 yards from the road, but man, this trail looks good. And look at all these rubs and what's this big padded down area, which I now know were probably beds. And I'd walk past them, but yeah, there's no way the deer would be here. It's too loud. It's too busy, and walk past it. So try those spots out. Keep them in mind. Like you say, that thick cover near that creek bottom is awesome. It's the deer travel through there. Like you say, they can disappear into anything. You have to be comfortable not seeing the deer coming from a long ways. You're not going to be able to watch a deer 200 yards across an open CRP field to you. They're going to be pop out at 20 yards and you better be ready and better be listening because you'll probably hear them before you see them. So you have to be comfortable with that and not seeing them for extended periods, but it's a fun way to hunt.
Now, how do you move your stands around on the public land?
So a number of things. So we use a couple different methods. We have climbing tree stands. So we use those a lot. We have pre-marked trees. We GPS them on a phone app and then put a single tack on the tree so that we can find that particular tree. We have a couple of permanent ladder stands for some of the guys who aren't keen on using climbing tree stand. And those permanent ladder stands are labor intensive to move from year to year. And they do have to be adjusted depending on what the food source is and what the deer behavior is and how high the drain is or the creek is. And then we also do a little bit of, we've just gotten into this in the last probably 2 years, some hang and hunt, quote unquote, using some climbing sticks and a tree stand on your back and going up that way as well. I think the main difference between that and a climbing stand is the hang and hunt gives you a little bit more opportunities for different trees, whereas the climbing stand, you have to have a pretty specific tree to be able to get up in it. It needs to be relatively straight. It needs to be a certain diameter. The climbing sticks and hang on stand, you have a few more options of what to do. So we use kind of a mix of everything. We don't overlook hunting from the ground if we have to. We have to make best out of the situation and try to do what works.
I've heard people are using slings now, and I'll never do that just because of my age. But that's an interesting concept because you can basically, with a set of sticks, you can go into any tree you want in the forest.
I met a gentleman working in the emergency department because he had a corneal abrasion, took a stick in the eye, and I asked him how he got it. And he said, well, he was out bow hunting. So that obviously sent us off on a tangent. And I were to later find out that he hunts primarily using a sling. And this was, good 6-7 years ago before it was real popular. He was basically riding the coattails of kind of the Eberhards and doing his thing. And man, did that guy ever kill some big deer. And he had preset, some trees with foot pegs and hunted from a sling. I haven't dabbled in it, but the guys who do it say you'll never go back. So something to think about.
Yeah, it's also, correct me if I'm wrong, they call them saddles, sling saddles. Yeah, in saddle. And I've just never done it, but they're highly effective and highly functional. And so it's interesting how our industry keeps evolving because running and gunning is nothing but hang on your back and 3 feet. So you get up 9 feet and a little higher. and then you just go where the deer are, or you see deer and you pat them deer. And I like to do that if I'm hunting a place 3 days. And that's my technique now. I'll only hunt one stand for 3 days, and that's it. I'll commit to that stand for 3 days. And the first day is the best day. Then it goes 60%. Then it goes to 40%. I know there's deer there. I already know deer are there, but you have to be willing to move and adapt. And I guess that's the biggest thing that I'd like to close now, because I know you got patients waiting. But what advice you want to give to the people about adapting your hunting style?
So my biggest advice is kind of look at the place that you're hunting, what your hunting opportunities are, and then kind of adapt your style from there. If you've got 40 acres and that's it, and it's private land, then you're going to want to be a little less aggressive. Probably you're going to want to watch the wind. You're going to want to time those situations. If you've got 1,000 acres of public land to kind of traverse, then you can be a little more aggressive and run and gun and move around. How you want to do that, whether it's with a saddle or a climbing stand or hunting from the ground, I think there's more than one way to skin a buck, and lots of these things will work. And I think, that there's lots of people who have hunted from the ground for years and years and years. This is tried and true that can work as well. So I think you have to look at what your scenario is, what your goals are, and work from there. That said, traveling a mile back into a swamp looking for buck beds and getting soaked and coming out of the woods 2 hours past dark isn't for everyone either. So there's lots of guys who are very successful doing that kind of hunting. They put their work in, but it's not for everyone. So you have to think about, what are your goals? What are you looking to get out of the experience? Not the size of the antler or the size of the deer that you're going to get. What's the experience that you're looking for? Are you looking for just a hunt camp experience? Then get a bunch of like-minded guys together, set a weekend that you're going to use every year, find a place where you can go and hang out and have fun and enjoy it. So I think you need to know what your goals are, and then you can kind of adapt your hunting style appropriately.
Dr. James Mathers, thank you so much for being an alumni of Whitetail Rendezvous. And I certainly won't let too many years go by before we have you back on the show. But as always, you're a gracious guest, and I just enjoy our relationship, and I look forward to more.
Well, thanks very much, Bruce. I appreciate you having me on the show. Enjoyed listening to it over the years, and hopefully it won't be so long before I can get back and chat again with you.
One last thing, how do people reach out to you or listen to what you got going on social media?
So I think the best way at this point is to look us up on social media, Twitter and Instagram. The handle is @thehuntblog, all one word. The website is thehuntblog.com, and it's under some reconstruction right now. If you go through our social media, you can get in touch with our YouTube page, where we have a lot of our kind of self-filmed hunts up on there for turkey, deer, a little bit of fishing, some educational videos as well. So that's probably the best way to kind of get in touch if you want to reach out or see what we've got going on as far as our social media.
With that, thank you, folks, for listening to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous. And be on the lookout for Deer Hunting Institute Part 1. It's coming to social media close to you very soon.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, where you can listen and learn from the experts so you can be more successful on your next hunt. Until next time, listen, learn, and succeed.